Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Richard Fowler from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Introduction to Building Energy Asset Score. A few logistics before we get started. All participants are in a listen-only mode. If you have questions during the broadcast, you may ask them in the question pane on the right-hand side of the screen. These questions will be documented, and we will try to answer them directly via email following the webinar. The webinar is being recorded and will be posted for availability at a later date, along with a PDF of the presentation slides, which we will also email to you following the broadcast. Asset Score is available as a part of the suite of analysis tools for commercial buildings sponsored by the U.S. Department of Energy Building Technologies Office. BTO's Building Energy Data subprogram supports the creation of standards and open source management tools that increase the availability and value of building energy data. We encourage you to visit the link here below to learn more about these tools. There also are a series of webinars that you might join. This webinar is part of a series of recent and upcoming webinars providing insight and instruction for using some of the aforementioned analysis tools. For example, Introduction to SEED and Introduction to the Audit Template will take place later this week, and an Advanced Features webinar for SEED will take place in May. At the conclusion of today's session, we hope you will have acquired the following: a greater awareness of the Asset Score tool, an understanding of the basics of data collection, tool navigation, data entry, and score reports, an insight into tool best practices, and where to go for help and additional resources. The session will be divided into 3 sections listed here, followed by a step-by-step demonstration of how to enter and score a building. So what is Asset Score? Asset Score is a free web-based tool for assessing the physical and structural energy efficiency of commercial and multifamily residential buildings. It provides an evaluation of the building energy assets, which are comprised of the building envelope, or roof, walls, windows, and its major systems, including lighting, mechanical, electrical, service hot water equipment. And the graphic you see on the screen here includes the major components and factors that affect a building's energy use. And it illustrates the fact that Asset Score evaluates the building components inside the dotted blue box. The tool does not take into account user inputs for the items outside the blue box, such as operating schedules and occupant behavior, to generate an Asset Score. Instead, it uses a set of standard operating assumptions. In sum, Asset Score reflects the energy efficiency of a building based solely on its design, construction, and energy systems, which is normalized for operational and occupancy factors using standard operating assumptions by building type. And this enables users to quickly compare the physical energy efficiency of their buildings with other buildings, communicate building efficiency to the marketplace, and identify opportunities to invest in energy efficiency upgrades. A little bit of background on why the tool was developed. It was developed with the idea and a goal of expanding nationwide awareness of opportunities to invest in building energy upgrades, to provide quick and easy tool to help guide energy improvement decisions and investments, to help make the job of an auditor easier and faster, and as a tool to work in conjunction with benchmarking or building energy audits. It is not intended to be a replacement for other analysis tools, but to complement other tools such as Energy Star Portfolio Manager, for example. We are often asked if the two tools are the same and/or how they may be different, so we'll address that here. An Energy Star Portfolio Manager score enables the comparison of buildings based on their energy consumption as indicated by actual energy bills, i.e. how your building actually performs based on use. A Portfolio Manager score may reflect how efficiently a building is operated and maintained. In contrast to that, Asset Score reflects the energy efficiency of a building based solely on its design, construction, and energy systems, i.e. how your building should perform based on construction. The score may be seen as similar to a miles per gallon sticker as seen on cars. Do want to point out that the scores of the two tools are not directly comparable. Once again, asset score reflects modeled energy use under standard operating conditions, while portfolio manager scores reflect measured energy use under actual operating conditions. However, using both tools gives users powerful information that can inform both energy upgrades and improvements in building operations. For example, in the graphic seen here, a building that receives a low Energy Star score and a high asset score may be an indication that the building may benefit from a retuning or a retrocommissioning. Or a building that receives a high Energy Star score and a low asset score may be an indication that the building may benefit from some capital improvements. Recently, the Seattle Building Tune-Up Accelerator program used both of these tools as part of their Building Tune-Up Accelerator program. They have a website which includes information on this program, and it includes a link to a webinar which includes a review of how these tools were used. So what does the tool do? Well, it does two things. It generates an energy asset score ranging from 1 to 10 that reflects the building's as-built physical characteristics and overall energy efficiency, independent of occupancy and operational choices. And it produces an asset score report, which includes the total estimated building energy usage and energy use by end use under standard operating conditions, an energy efficiency assessment of the building's individual systems, and a listing of suggested energy efficiency opportunities. Taking a look at the asset score itself, it's a shaded 10-point gradient graphical scale representing a building's efficiency, where 10 is the highest achievable score, reflecting the lowest expected energy use for a building of a particular use type that is achievable using current building energy efficiency technologies without renewables. A score of 10 would qualify it to be considered a high-performance building. Different score scales are used for different building use types to ensure that buildings are scored fairly by accounting for differences in standard operating conditions. Basically, you would compare offices to offices, retail to retail, etc. There are call-out boxes above the score scale, which include a current score, which is the score generated for a specific building entered into the asset scoring tool, and a potential score, which is an estimated score that may be achieved after recommended efficiency upgrades identified by the asset scorer made. There's also a notice of estimated savings, which reflect the reduction in source energy that would result from undertaking all of the efficiency improvements identified by the tool. I do want to point out that actual savings, of course, will depend on a variety of factors, including actual operating conditions. So how does it work? Well, asset scoring uses the results from an Energy Plus simulation model to estimate the building's energy use intensity. The model applies the information you provide about the building's overall characteristics and energy systems, as well as standard operating assumptions about operation and weather. The estimated EUI is then adjusted to account for local climate and then converted into a score, as we mentioned, ranging from 1 to 10. The model provides default or inferred values when certain variables are not entered by the users of the tool, and performs an analysis to provide feedback on areas and options for energy efficiency improvement. Energy use estimates, OpenStudio, and Energy Plus models may be downloaded for additional analysis. As shown in the last box on the right, reports in the form of PDF, CSV, OSM, IDF files are all available after a building has been modeled and scored. Speaking of scoring, how do I score a building? Basically, it's pretty straightforward. You collect data by conducting a building walkthrough, or from previously conducted energy audits, or from other documentation that you have access to. Then you can launch the web-based tool on a desktop or laptop for data entry, and finally submit the building for a simulation to generate a score report. A couple things I want to point out about data collection. You may record data using your own custom form or spreadsheet, or use the Asset Score data collection forms, which are available to download from the Asset Score resources page listed here. These available forms include either a short form, which lists the minimum required data fields necessary to generate a score. It's used for simple buildings and if you have a limited knowledge of asset details. And then there's a long form, which includes all of the available asset score input fields and identifies which of these fields are required and which are optional. I do want to point out that the tool presently doesn't have the capability to electronically upload sets of building data into the tool. Inputs are all done by hand at the moment. So let's get started. We're going to use the building pictured here as an example for entering into asset score. This building is a mixed-use building with 4 floors of office space over a single floor with retail space. Note that if you have a mixed-use building such as this, the tool will generate and display a separate asset score for each use type, as well as a combined score for the whole building using a weighted average of the scores for the individual use types based on square footage. Minimum asset score inputs for our example building have been listed here in a table for ease of reference. We've captured the important items that you'll need to enter. Every building will need to have a roof type, a wall type, floor type selected, for example, and we'll get into that pretty soon. On the right, bottom right there is a Google Maps image. The tool provides an opportunity to generate a graphical representation of your building's footprint and shape in the form of blocks. And you will need to input geometric dimensions to generate these blocks. If you don't have access to building dimensions or geometry inputs, you can use Google Earth or Google Maps to help approximate the known total floor area, building shape, orientation, and window to wall ratio if you haven't gathered that data ahead of time. So assuming we have gathered our data, now we can proceed to connect to buildingenergyscore.energy.gov. If you haven't done so already, like many of you actually have, I believe, you can select the register button, follow the prompts and email confirmation instructions, enter your email and password to log in. And before we do that, for our demo, I just want to point out a few items you'll find on the login page. The first item is a question mark icon. These are available throughout the tool, which links to an online user guide. There's a help desk button, which launches a form to send a question to the asset score technical support team. And there's a link to the quick start guide, which outlines a 6-step process for scoring a building and can be a handy reference to use as you're entering your information. Users logging in for the first time will see a one-time welcome screen for the asset score suite of tools. And I think without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the tool. So I'm going to end the slides here for a moment. And here, as I mentioned, we have our login screen, the link to the quick start guide, which is a PDF displayed here with the 6 steps where you input your basic information, identify a use type, create an inventory of your building's features, create 3D blocks for your building, assign your features, and then score your building. So I already have an account, of course, so I'm going to log in. And as you can see here, I've already created several buildings, and these are displayed in a table on the home page. You can, as mentioned, this is part of there are a suite of tools available. These are identified by the highlighted tabs at the top of the screen here and by the logo on the top of the table here. The table may be sorted by any of the headings. You can sort by ID, last modified, or when if the building has been, what the status is. As you can see here, I have a couple buildings that have already been scored, and they are in rated mode. There's some buildings that are in editing mode. There's a filter on the far right side of the screen here, where you can, maybe you only want to view buildings that have been scored. You can select that filter. And now all that have been displayed are the rated buildings. You can also use this search box here to enter a keyword search. For example, maybe we only want to see our example buildings. And now we have just the 3 buildings that we have filtered for. This could be useful if you've, as I've done here, have created multiple buildings and you want to easily reference only a handful at a time. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and enter our example building by selecting the big green Add a Building button at the right-hand side of the screen here. And you'll see there are a pair of input modes. There's a preview input mode where you can enter just a handful of inputs and you get an estimated score range and score report preview. This is a feature that may not be supported in the long run, so we're not going to spend any time on that at the moment and just focus on the full input mode of the tool. And we're going to select the green asset score button to continue. And now we have a data entry screen to enter basic building information. As you can see here, there's a star next to some of the input fields. If you were to attempt to advance from this screen without entering the information, it will prompt you that this field is required. So that's what the star indicates. And we're going to start by just giving a building name for this particular demonstration. And we need a year of completion. Note that this could be the year of completion or year of last major retrofit. If our building was built in 1920, for example, but in the year 2000 had undergone a series of upgrades, you would want to enter that. Otherwise, the tool will assume that all the components are older components and may recommend upgrades that have already been implemented. Of course, the building needs to have a total floor area and a location. And we're going to select somewhere in Chicago. There's an indication where you can identify whether the building is an actual building, or in this case, a test building used for test purposes. And there's a couple of checkboxes for additional advanced system parameters. We're not going to talk about those at the moment, but if you're interested what those may be, as I indicated, each input screen has a help button that launches the online user guide. And it gives definitions of what the inputs are and instructions pertaining to the particular input screen that you are editing. So we've entered our basic building information. We're going to select Create Building. And now what will follow is a series of prompts to guide us through adding our building components. If you want, you can actually skip all of these and just hit next, next, next. But we're going to go ahead and do these one at a time because just to demonstrate how the tool basically walks you through step by step as for easy reference. The first item we need to enter is a building use type. And as I mentioned in our description, we have a office use type. Hopefully you can see this drop-down menu here where there are 19 commonly used or commonly seen building use types. We're going to select office and add, and we're going to select retail and add. Once again, there's 19 available use types. We're in the process of adding commercial kitchens and hospitals and possibly a few others in the future. But these are what we have so far in the tool, and there are some of the more commonly used use types. Okay, next we can add construction assemblies. As I mentioned earlier, every building needs to have a roof type selected, a wall, floors, etc. And this is where you can do that. There is a button up here to enter infiltration information. It will ask you if you're aware if your building has been air leakage, tested for air leakage. If you say yes and you happen to know what that rate may be, you can enter it here. Or if it hasn't been tested, it can prompt you for the building code that was tested for. So for example, maybe it complies with IEC C 2015, and you can enter that information here. Okay, so let's go ahead and add our roof by selecting Add Roof. Maybe it's a metal building, built up with metal deck. If you happen to know what the thermal properties are, you can enter them here. R value, insulation, U value. But maybe we don't know what those are, so we're going to leave it as I don't know. You'll need to select an occupancy type in that case, in which case this is a non-residential building. And we've now created a roof. Skylights are optional, but if you happen to have some present, you can enter those. We're going to bypass that and just add walls and a floor. And in this case, maybe we do know what the insulation is. And maybe it's R30 insulation value. So we'll go ahead and enter that. And then you have an opportunity to add windows. If you notice here, the tool automatically gives it a name, window 1, but maybe you can add your own identifier, whatever you choose to enter. And it asks for a glass type. Once again, thermal properties. Maybe you do know the thermal properties of the window, where you can enter U value, SHGC, and maybe you don't know what the visual transmission is, so we'll just leave it blank. And then we're going to move on to lighting. As you notice here, the more you advance, the more icons you see up above. This will eventually display all of the sections of the tool. Right now we're in lighting. We can add lighting fixtures that are present in the building. Maybe it has some T8s that are pendant. Maybe they're 40-watt tubes, 2 lamps per fixture. And maybe the building has some LEDs. Maybe they're recessed cans, just 1 lamp per fixture. And then we can move on to HVACs. In the HVAC section, you can enter equipment components individually, for example, air handlers, zone equipment. Maybe the building has a chiller plant loop or a boiler plant loop. You can also select this Add HVAC Systems button, and this will bring a drop-down of commonly used or commonly available HVAC systems. For example, in our building, maybe we have a packaged rooftop air conditioning system, and when we select that, it's going to tell you that it will automatically assign DX as the cooling source, central furnace as the heating source, and a single zone distribution type for an air handler. After we hit create system, you'll notice when we scroll down a little bit that an air handler has been created, and you can edit that air handler with additional information. For example, maybe you're aware that there are 4 units on the roof. Maybe they maybe they each have different efficiencies, and if that's the case, you can enter a weighted average of what the efficiency is. So for example, maybe we've already calculated that. Speaking of calculation, the efficiencies should not include supply fan energy, and we've provided a link to a spreadsheet tool that can help you calculate what that value is. If you notice, it's not a required field, but it could be useful for helping to provide a more refined set of information for your inputs for your HVAC system. So maybe we're aware of what the efficiency is for the cooling system, but maybe we're not aware of what the efficiency is for the heating system, so we're going to leave that blank and let the tool use assumed values for that. Same thing for controls. Maybe we're not sure if it has an economizer or an energy recovery ventilation. So we're going to leave those blank and go ahead and move on to the next set of inputs, which are water heaters. Water heaters are not required to enter in the tool, but of course it could be a significant portion of energy use. So we're going to go ahead and enter one anyway. And operations are also not required, but it could be useful for helping to determine what your potential score is. If you choose to enter an elevator, you can enter it here. And if you do that, you can link it to the operations, where you select the previously selected elevator, and maybe you are aware of what the occupancy is of your building, what the set points are. And of course, you can have different operations for different portions of your building. So maybe your office is open on weekdays, and you could set the operations for retail. Maybe the retail is open on the weekends. We're going to leave that alone for now and go ahead and move on to the next portion of the data entry. If you notice, there's a prompt here that says, hey, we're about ready to move on to the geometry portion. Are you ready? You can say yes. If you say no, you can go. If you say no, you have the opportunity to go back and edit any of the inputs you've already made, but the prompt is also indicating you can still make changes to your edits if you advance, and we'll see that in just a moment. So we'll say okay, and after we've done that, we are now we can now see the display screen for the tool, where you can have an opportunity to enter your building blocks. And as mentioned earlier, there's the toolbar is now fully complete, and you can use that toolbar to navigate among the sections of the tool. For example, if you want to edit your lighting that we've already entered, or your HVAC system, just select the icons available from the toolbar at the top of your screen. Also, if you notice, one of these has a little icon with a warning that says you might want to pay attention to something right here, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But if you happen to see this icon, you will not be able to score your building until all the icons on the toolbar are gone. So, okay, so we're going to enter the geometry by selecting the Add Block Plus button. We're going to give it a name. Maybe it's for our office building. You can toggle between above ground or below ground. In this case, it's above ground. If you notice, the tool puts some defaults for average floor-to-floor height and floor-to-ceiling height. If you have not measured what those are, you can just stick with the defaults. But maybe you are aware of if the building has plenums. You can enter those dimensions here. If you're aware of maybe you're aware that the front of the building faces, say, east or 90 degrees from north, you can enter the orientation. And you can select from 5 different shapes for your building block. If you don't see a shape of your building that listed here, like for example, the tool doesn't have the availability to model an S shape or a circle or a courtyard, just do the best you can by selecting an approximate shape for your building. For example, a courtyard, you can use 2 U shapes or 2 L shapes, and I'll show you how to move those around in just a moment to get an approximation. And once again, I'm emphasizing approximation and not, your building does not have to exactly match the footprint, just as close as you can. I forgot to enter the number of floors. So I'll enter that here, and if you notice, the tool automatically calculated the total floor area once I did that. So it was calculating the length and the width, of course, and then the number of floors. So now we have an office block, and we're going to go ahead and enter a retail block. And now we have two blocks. If you notice, the tool automatically stacked the retail block on top of the office block, but in our picture, we're aware that the retail is actually on the ground floor. So we're going to move that by clicking and holding on the block that you created. Notice it highlights in green, and we're going to slide it down to the ground level, and then we're going to grab the office block and drag it right on top of the office block. As you noticed, of course, you have a lot of flexibility in how you want to arrange your buildings. Of course, maybe buildings may be side by side. They may be offset a little bit. They may be not even connected. You can enter as many blocks as you want, and once again, they don't have to be connected. This could be useful if you're modeling a campus set of buildings, for example, a school, a university, or office campus. You can model several blocks all at once. Let's see. You can also use a couple of tools as seen here at the bottom of the screen that may be handy for you. For example, I mentioned if your blocks are offset, and you can actually enter the distance that they may be set aside. Maybe your buildings are 20 feet across. You can use this tool here to toggle on a guide, or there's also a toggle block for, a toggle button for snapping. By default, if you pull it apart, the closer you get, it'll kind of automatically snap for you. But if you want to toggle that off, you can remove it for a little bit more precise assistance in moving your blocks around. Okay, we're going to keep those toggled off and stack our block once again. One other thing, you can zoom in or zoom out, and that could be helpful in placement of blocks with a little bit more complexity to them. Okay, once your blocks are all set, then we need to add our components. If you notice, now you have quite a few warnings up here, and that's because your components haven't been assigned to your blocks. First thing you want to assign are use types, and to assign a component, hold your mouse over the item, click and hold, and drag and drop. Basically, hover over the block and let go. As you can see, it's now highlighted in blue, so our office has been assigned. Now we need to assign our retail. And that has been assigned, and the little warning has gone away. So we can move on to our construction assemblies. And the notification here says every block must have an assigned roof assembly. So we'll drop our roof onto the office block, and then we'll drop our roof onto the retail block. Now, some of you may be wondering, why do I need to assign a roof to the retail block when it's underneath the office? Basically, the model will recognize when the blocks are stacked, and it knows that this isn't really a roof per se, but for the exercise of completing the model, the tool actually does require that you assign a roof and a floor, for that matter, on each of your blocks. The next upgrade to the tool will have the capability to assign adiabatic walls. For example, this building here, we're assuming is a standalone building but maybe the building is in reality adjacent to another building, um, and we'll have the capability to address that very soon here. Okay, we've assigned a roof and a floor. Now we need to assign a wall to each of our blocks. And if you notice, the warning went away because windows aren't necessarily required to model your building, but we do know that both of these blocks have windows, so we're going to go assign windows. When you notice, if you'll notice that when I did that, another pop-up window appeared. That's because window inputs need a few more inputs. You have the opportunity to identify whether your windows are continuous, in which case you need to enter a window to wall ratio. So maybe office is 50% windows. You can enter a shading type if you want. And we're going to assume that the retail block maybe has we'll say a few more windows, maybe it's 70%. Okay, so now we're all ready to move on to lighting, but I do want to point out a couple more things on this screen here. For example, if you're aware that, so maybe your building has 50% windows, but there's no windows on the north side of your building, for example. If that's the case, you can select this Edit Surfaces button and click on a particular surface, and you can choose to remove the windows from that surface. Then if you toggle that off and select your block, it'll give an indication that this block has different windows on various surfaces. This can give you a more representative display in the model of how your building is actually constructed. If you had selected a discrete window layout, for example, maybe maybe you went around and counted and measured the number of windows in your building, you can select this option. And then if you select the Edit Surfaces button, you'll see that the tool automatically assigned 3 windows for each surface to add up to the 12 that I entered. But once again, if you want to edit that, maybe your north face has 6 and your south face has 2. You can go ahead and edit. Use this Edit Surfaces button to adjust accordingly. Okay, let's move on to lighting. We need to assign our lighting. Once again, when you do that, a little prompt, another pop-up window appears, which indicates one more entry that needs to be addressed. You have the opportunity, if you've conducted an audit and literally counted all of the fixtures in the office building, you can enter that value here. And if you notice, the tool automatically calculated a lighting power density. This could be a good check to make sure you're entering a reasonable value. For example, if I only entered 2 for that size of a space, it's going to say, hey, just so you know, the lighting you entered is lower than typically found. You might want to just double check your inputs. If you didn't physically go out and count how many fixtures, but you have a rough idea that the office is only using T8s, for example, you can enter percent serve value. And then we're going to go ahead and assign lighting fixtures for retail. And maybe the retail portion of your building is 50-50. So we're going to, enter 50% for the T8 and 50% for the LEDs. Okay, moving on to HVAC. Once again, the air handler that we created is available. Once again, you can edit that. Maybe you have recently gathered some more information and found out that the fan controls are variable. You can update that if you choose to do so, and then assign to both of the blocks. Once again, there's a quick pop-up indicating there's another input for you, and that would be a thermal zone layout. You can enter single zone or perimeter and core, and enter a value for what that depth may be. Maybe you don't know what the thermal zone layout is, in which case you can leave it blank and let the tool use assumptions. Now, as you can see, all of the warnings have gone away up here. There is a little yellow warning button right here that it's just saying, hey, by the way, you entered 20,000 square feet, but then when you created blocks, it's actually 40,000 square feet, and your report's going to have two different values on there. So we just wanted to let you know that to adjust if you choose to do that. And so you can go into the building information screen and edit the previously entered building information and adjust accordingly. And now this warning has gone away. If you do recall, we had entered water heaters and operations. Since they're not required, it's not prompting you to assign them. But if you want to make sure that they do get assigned, you'll want to go ahead and go into those sections of the tool and assign accordingly, which we have done here. If you click on the building, there is one input where you can select low flow faucets if you're aware that the service water system has a set of those. You can check that box. We're going to leave it blank for now. Move on to the operations. You can grab the office operation as we had indicated and drop it onto the block. We did not enter retail. We're going to leave that blank and just assume we're not sure what the additional operations are for that. And then we're all ready to score our building. Before we do that, the building information screen gives you the opportunity to review all of your inputs at once on this screen here. And the little red indicators are an indication that you can edit a component directly from this screen. For example, maybe we realize that we made a mistake and chose the wrong wall type. You can change that here instead of going back to the actual section in the tool over here on the construction. So that's just a handy way to review and edit as needed. Okay, so we're ready to score our building. You go ahead and select the big green score button on the right-hand side. And what you see here is a kind of a quick preview of what your report might look like. It already has evaluated your building enough to know that it's going to include a recommendation that you add insulation to your roof and your wall for our building, for our demonstration building, for example. And that's handy in a couple of ways. First of all, if you you see this recommendation and you're pretty sure that you didn't actually go up into the roof and find out what the insulation is, but you're pretty sure that the building has enough insulation, you can deselect whether you want that displayed on your report. Maybe you're giving a report to a building owner, and rather than have them question, why am I seeing a recommendation to add roof insulation when I just added it last year, you can choose to not have that displayed on your report. We're going to go ahead and select all the recommendations for envelope and for lighting. And the other handy information on this preview is that you can choose to select for HVAC, you can choose to select whether to have the tool give you its own evaluation and recommendations of what your HVAC system improvements could be, or you can see that the tool is giving you an option to select one of these high performance options. For example, if you select the option to replace the HVAC system with a dedicated outdoor air supply with a ground source heat pump, you can select that and know that when your score comes through that it will be identified as a high performance building in your recommendation. So we're going to leave that blank for the moment, and we're going to let the tool evaluate what it sees based on our inputs. And we're going to select score building. And a prompt will say, okay, it's been submitted. You'll get an email notification when your report is ready for download, and let you go back to your home page. There's an indication up here, by the way, your building is currently being scored and cannot be viewed or changed. So we're just going to leave it alone and let it do its thing, but we're not going to sit and wait for it. It'll probably take 3 or 4 minutes. Instead, we're going to take a look at a couple of buildings that have already been scored. For example, these 2 buildings here. And this is an example where I did select the high performance building option. When I didn't select it, the building had a current score of 3.5 with a potential score of 9. So it had some recommendations that if those were implemented, your building would score pretty high. But when the high performance building selection was selected, it shows that by implementing that recommendation, you can actually score a 10. So if you want to look at your report, there's a big yellow download button on the right-hand side here. And when you select that, you have the opportunity to download the PDF report. And as I mentioned earlier, Asset Scorer gives the opportunity to download an Open Studio model or an Energy Plus model for both your current building as it's built or as it's built with the recommendation upgrades configurations. So when we select Download Report, here's the PDF. Right up front here, you see the score scale and your score, the estimated source energy use, the standard operations that are used for each of the use types will be displayed on another screen. Once again, this is a mixed use building, and this is the overall score for the whole building. Energy use by intensity and fuel type are displayed in this box here. And let's see, let's advance to, okay, so this is the office portion of the building. As you see, it's scored a 3 with a potential of a 9. But if you scroll down to the retail portion, remember that we had selected LED lighting for a portion of the retail building, and that had a significant impact on the score of the retail. Once again, here are the standard operating conditions and assumptions that are listed over here. And then we have the upgrade opportunities for the building. As we saw earlier, we see a recommendation for upgrading the windows, the roof insulation, the wall insulation, upgrading the lighting in the for our T8s, recommend some occupancy sensors. For the HVAC system, it's recommending to add some controls, economizer, DCV, variable frequency drive, etc. And here's where maybe you can review your report and think, oh, actually, I think this building has an economizer. You can go back and make an adjustment to your building and rescore it, and then this recommendation will not be displayed. If you're curious what some of the recommendations are, if you notice there's a little Learn More link that will link out to a portion of the building upgrade guide. That can give a little background and more details on specific technologies that maybe recommendation that you may be seeing in your report. Okay, let's go back to the home page real quick. So where do we go from here? What do I do with my report? As I indicated, you can download it and for your records, or maybe you want to score your building again. As I mentioned, maybe make adjustments for that economizer that was in there. You can open up the building and take it out of from scoring mode to edit mode by selecting edit your building, and then you can rescore your building, or you can just leave it alone and leave it as is, and you can make a copy of your building by selecting this little gear icon on the underneath the options column and select duplicate building, and now you have a copy of your building, and you can maybe change the name of your building, um, and maybe version 2 of your building has some additional adjustments, and then you can score your building and then do a comparison of the two buildings with your different changes. You may also choose to share your building with somebody else, maybe a colleague or a building owner or a city that may require you to provide reports to them. And so there's a sharing feature. First, you would need to select the Manage button here and create contacts to share with. This gives you an opportunity to find other people that have an asset score account. For example, if I'm looking for myself, I find that I have several accounts with different emails, and I can add myself as a contact, which I have done here on this screen. You see, kind of like Facebook, it'll send an outgoing request, and the person you're wanting to add to your contact list would need to accept or ignore that contact request. Once you've done that, then you can share your buildings with that individual or other account by selecting the Manage Asset Score Building Shares. And all the buildings that you own in your account are now listed in a table. For example, the building we just created, version 2, you can select and then share with any of the individuals that you have identified on your contact list. And then that building is shared with that other account. So I think I have covered an awful lot of information in a rapid period of time. I'm going to return to the slideshow real quick to point out a couple other things. Bear with me just a moment. Okay. Yes, as mentioned earlier, Asset Score is part of a suite of tools. I do want to point out there's another tool that may be of interest to members of the building community, which is called the Audit Template. The Audit Template may be used to collect, store, and report building energy audit data. An audit data report may be submitted to cities to demonstrate audit completion for compliance. I think I mentioned earlier, we're going to be conducting an Introduction to Audit Template webinar on Thursday. Feel free to send us a note via the help desk if you'd like us to forward the registration link for that. And as I mentioned, I covered a lot of things pretty fast. I hope I was able to cover all of the items you were hoping to learn today. But if not, there are several places you can go for additional information, including the Asset Score resources page, which has additional documents, including videos, example reports, etc. You may also, as I indicated, send us questions or view the user guide by accessing the Asset Score help desk. And I do want to, finally, I want to point out that the New Jersey Institute of Technology's Center for Building Knowledge has recently launched an Asset Score training and certificate program. The training program is organized into 13 individual training modules delivered online. Upon completion of the modules and successfully passing an online assessment, you can receive a formal certificate of completion. Connect to assetscorecertificate.org for more information and to register. So this concludes today's webinar. I hope I was able to meet the objectives outlined at the beginning of the broadcast, and I hope that you find AssetScore to be a useful tool for your building energy efficiency projects and programs. On behalf of Pacific Northwest National Laboratory and the Department of Energy, thank you for your time and have a good day.